Death plays an important role in movies. It can be used to push a plot forward to the next objective, it can further develop the impacted characters and their arcs, or it can usually just straight up traumatize you for life as the viewer.
Emotional damage!
And when it comes to impactful deaths in movies, the MCU is no different. So today I want to give you my picks for the top 5 most impactful MCU deaths. This episode's gonna be kind of a bummer, isn't it? Nah. Only if you let it be. Before we get started, I want y'all to drop a comment down below and tell me what your pick would be for the most impactful MCU death. And in case you're wondering what my criteria is going to be, it's primarily going to be based around the significant emotional impact to the audience, while also factoring in the aftermath of the death and also adding in the ripple effect to the surrounding impacted characters. So with that all being said, let's jump right into my list. At number 5, I have Gamora's death on Vormir. This death represented so many shifts in the plot and character arcs of Infinity War. At this point in the movie, we have still yet to discover the location of the Soul Stone, which Thanos needs to come closer to completing the Infinity Gauntlet. After torturing Nebula, Gamora's sister, Thanos discovers the location of the stone, Vormir. After arriving on the planet, they're faced with Red Skull, who reveals that Thanos must sacrifice the thing he loves most to receive the stone. And that sacrifice is revealed to be Gamora. This is what completely shifts our perspective on Thanos. Even though he is very much still the villain of this movie, for a brief moment we can see the pain and emotion that he has to go through when he decides to sacrifice his daughter. The audience is left thinking, Thanos actually loves somebody? And this humanizes him even more as we go into the finale of the movie. When it comes to everything else about this scene, the music, the cinematography, the emotions, it's just gripping stuff.
I'm sorry, little one.
Not to mention that Gamora's death is actually what prevents the Avengers from getting the upper hand on Thanos later on in the movie. Peter Quill. Now in his defense, none of us are perfect. And if we were in the same position that he was, there's no telling how we would have acted if we would have found that the person that we loved the most had been killed. And plus, his emotional outburst is definitely well within what we know his character to be about. At number 4, I have Aunt May's death from Spider-Man: No Way Home. This one was truly unexpected and shocking. The MCU's Aunt May was always used for more comedic moments, and kinda took the role of Peter's cool, hip relative. Say what you will about this interpretation of Aunt May, but personally, I believe that Marissa Tomei brought so much life and energy to her performance as Aunt May. And I've said this in other videos, but I truly love the dynamic between her and Peter. That's what makes her death all the more shocking when she gets caught in the crossfire of a Green Goblin attack. And the brutal part is that she appears to be initially okay, and is even able to finally give Peter the "great power comes great responsibility" speech.
You have a gift, you have power, and with great power, there must also come great responsibility.
But then you realize that this was just because May was in shock, and you as the audience are forced to watch Peter's heartbreaking reaction to watching her pass away. This bold decision to kill her off ended up bringing the character of Peter Parker as we know down to some new lows that we had never seen him reach before in the MCU. Also, by the time the movie ends, we see Peter visiting May's grave, truly alone. No one even knows that he's May's nephew. And looking into the future, if they handle his character arc as well as they did in this movie, this complete breakdown of his character can be an incredible springboard into his next trilogy. At number 3, I have Natasha sacrificing herself on Vormir. Yeah, I know that I used 2 instances from Vormir, and yes, technically the premise of her death is the same as Gamora's, but at least for me, this one felt different. The first reason I have is obviously that we have a much stronger connection to Black Widow than we do Gamora in the MCU. I mean, she's been in more movies, she's had a lot more character development, and you get the gist. But what really sets this one apart is the payoff of Clint and Natasha's bond that we've seen since the Avengers. We know how close these two are, and when given the opportunity to lay one's life down to save the universe, neither one hesitates. In fact, in an extreme act of selflessness, they both do everything in their power to prevent the other from making the sacrifice play. But in the end, Natasha prevails. The emotion displayed by both Jeremy Renner and Scarlett Johansson is top-notch, and it just makes the entire scene feel even more gut-wrenching. My one biggest complaint though is that we really don't see much of the Avengers mourning her loss after they hear of her sacrifice. I mean, yeah, they talk about it for a little, and Hulk throws a stone bench, but then after that, everyone just kind of moves on. She doesn't even get so much as a funeral. Maybe they had some extra scenes in there, but then they eventually had to cut it in post-production, because I mean, this was a 3-hour movie. But with all that Black Widow has added to the MCU throughout the years, I really wish she would have gotten a larger send-off. And no, before you say anything, I am not counting the movie that was released after she already died, which was basically just recapping the time she spent between Civil War and Avengers Infinity War. But that has nothing to do with Scarlett Johansson or the character of Black Widow. I believe that she is one of the best characters in the entire MCU, and going back to the point I mentioned earlier, I just wish she had a better send-off. Coming in at number 2, I have Yondu's death in Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2. Yondu's death is a great example of James Gunn taking a character that previously we really didn't have much emotional attachment to, and then turning that character into a charming, relatable, and memorable example of excellent writing and direction. In the first Guardians movie, Yondu is essentially just a gruff and menacing father figure to Peter Quill, with some comedic opportunities along the way.
The high-end community is...
The high-end community is...
It's a tight-knit
But by the time we're reaching the conclusion of Guardians 2, we've experienced Yondu in a whole new light. He's still tough as nails and incredibly gruff, but here he's also vulnerable and loving. We get to see his bond grow with Rocket Raccoon out of all things. But the true emotional heartbeat of this movie lies with the father-son dynamic of Peter Quill and Yondu. We spend the majority of the latter half of the movie witnessing Peter's unhealthy relationship with his biological father, which if you haven't seen the movie and you've read the comics, that also is Ego the Living Planet. But once we get to the end, we as the audience realize that it was Yondu who loved Peter all along as his son. And we also get maybe one of the best lines in MCU history.
He may have been your father, boy, but he wasn't your daddy.
And this all accumulates with Yondu choosing to sacrifice his own life to give his son the last spacesuit. Then, he dies in Peter's arms. This scene makes me emotional every single time I watch it, and I can't give the scriptwriters, director, and actors nearly enough credit for such an excellent, excellent scene. And finally, at number 1, coming as a shock to no one, I have Tony Stark's sacrifice in Avengers Endgame. We all kinda knew that this was gonna happen way before the movie even came out, but theorizing and anticipation is nowhere near the same feeling as watching it happen in real time. And I mean, the stage was set. Tony Stark was the main reason for the MCU's success, and now, it was finally time to say goodbye to the founding Avenger. For years, Tony had been tortured by the trauma and guilt that came with seeing his loved ones and colleagues constantly being put in harm's way. Now, he finally gets his chance to set things right, to give others a chance at life. But Iron Man and the Avengers face near impossible odds fighting against Thanos and his massive army. For a moment, it appears that Thanos has won. The Avengers lay scattered and defeated. The Infinity Gauntlet is in Thanos' hand. All is lost. But then, Doctor Strange reminds Tony that the one outcome where they win is still in play, and Tony doesn't hesitate. He charges at Thanos, and with a quick sleight of hand, he transfers the Infinity Stones to his own gauntlet. Then, delivers the line that started his entire journey into the MCU.
And I am Iron Man.
And upon defeating his enemy, the bane of his existence, the reason behind his nightmares, Tony can finally let go. His mission? Completed. His impact? Immeasurable. There is no MCU without Iron Man, and we still feel his absence almost 4 years after his passing. When you look at movies that have taken place after the death of Iron Man, you can still see the ripple effects to this day in relation to all of the characters that he's impacted and the lasting legacy that he leaves behind. He was a brilliant man, a loving husband, and a doting father. And in my personal opinion, I firmly believe that there will never be another character quite like Tony Stark.
I love you 3,000.
Whew! That was a doozy. I want to thank all of you for sticking around to the end of the video. Feel free to leave a like and subscribe if you enjoy my content. There are a ton of projects coming out in the next couple of months, and I don't want to miss a single one. So if you're interested in seeing any more of my future reviews, rankings, or pretty much any of my shenanigans, y'all know what to do. But with that out of the way, I want to thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.